Hey everyone, Cadian Sergeant Steel here, and today I want to talk to you about the rules preview for Octarius Warzone Book 1, Rising Tide. Specifically, the rules that were previewed on October 12th that involve the Cadians. And more specifically, these little guys. So, just in a brief video, I wanted to give you my thoughts on some of the rules that I've seen previewed, what I think they might mean, and where I think they may be going and some of the benefits of them. So let's start out with the very first thing that they previewed. The first thing was a stratagem called White Shields. For those who don't know, White Shields are the youth conscript service on the Cadian planet and within the Cadian system, usually indicated by a white stripe on their helmet to show that they were a youth conscript. So what this stratagem does, it costs 1 to 3 CP, and you use this before the battle when you're mustering your army. So when you're writing your list, and if you can only use it if your warlord has the Cadian keyword. You select one Cadian detachment from your army. All conscripts units in that detachment gain the White Shields keyword, gain leadership 6, and lose the raw recruits ability. So let's talk about that real quick. We don't know yet what the White Shields keyword does. We're going to assume that this probably procs some other type of stratagem or ability within the rule set. We have yet to see what this is. I'm very excited to see what this could be and how this could play out. Maybe it even impacts orders going forward. We don't know. But hopefully we'll find out very soon. Now, Leadership 6 is great. This is only a 1-point buff up from their current Leadership 5. But it does make a big difference with White Shields. And then especially when you start pairing that with other leadership buffs like the Regimental Standards or other items like that. Maybe put an Inquisitor next to them, which pretty much negates their Leadership 6. Okay, so never mind. Forget that. But other types of buffs in order to get their leadership higher. Of course, we have abilities also to completely negate leadership. But with a few rules changes, some of those are now only one use per battle. So this is nice just to have that extra little cushion there in our morale phase. The biggest benefit to this is they lose the raw recruits ability. Okay, so what's raw recruits? Because I get it. Not everybody is an infantry enthusiast. We're not all Mordian Glory. We're not all Cadian Sergeant Steel. So what's raw recruits, Cadian Sergeant Steel? That's that offer rule where conscripts only get to obey an order on a roll of 4+. There is a workaround to this, by the way. If you weren't aware, you could use a commissar to issue an order because technically raw recruits only applies to a model that issues an order if it has the officer keyword, and commissars currently do not. Get that in there, just in case you didn't know. So now conscripts auto pass orders. This is huge. You take a blob of 30 infantry models with buffed leadership, and they auto-pass their orders. They can move, an average move of 18 inches in a single turn. They can first rank fire, second rank fire. They can get back in the fight. All the orders are now opened up to them. I think this is a huge buff for the infantry of the Cadian army. So, where the CP comes into play on this, depending on how many conscript units you have. So this means there's some benefit to having bigger units. So taking 30-man units, you get more bang for your buck with this. But as you bring more units, so if you only have 1 to 2 units, it only costs 1 CP. If you have 3 or 4, it costs 2. And if you have 5 or more, it costs 3 CP. So I think that's pretty good. I mean, and also honestly, how many of us have more than 1 or 2 units of fully painted conscripts? Honestly, not me. You all have seen how big my army is. I'm working on it. I promise. But I'm not there yet. I don't have 3 fully painted 30-man units of conscripts. Although one day I will. I promise. So there's also another ability that comes with this. And it's about the specialist reinforcements requisition from the Crusade rules. But that's only if you're using Crusade play, so most folks aren't going to have to worry about that. The next rule that we got teased was another stratagem. So this one's called Cadian Stands. One command point. You use this in any phase when a unit is targeted for an attack. And until the end of that phase, each time an attack is made against that unit, so for the whole phase, unmodified wound rolls of 1 and 2 fail, irrespective of any abilities. Now this is really important, because the irrespective is the really powerful rule mechanics now within the game that allows you to just supersede all other rules. Even if a model has a rule that says they always wound on 2s, well, irrespective of any ability or modifier for the weapon or the model that's making the attack. That's nice, because then if it adds 1 to the wound roll, right? An unmodified wound roll of 1 or 2 fails. So this does come in handy for those extra buffed weapons that we might come up against. And if not, if somebody is using a strength 6 or higher weapon against your infantry, this would allow you to reduce your casualties by approximately 16%. But wait, it gets better. If the attack has a damage characteristic of only 1, which isn't as many weapons now, but it's still a lot of weapons in the game, you add 1 to the armor saving throw made against that attack. Ooh, so 5 up armor naturally. Then you put them in cover, whether you bring the Old Aegis defense line or you have them in light cover, so they're at a 4 up. Then you give them a psychic barrier, 3 up. Then you do Cadian Stands. You now have models, infantry models, potentially a 30-man unit of conscripts with a 2-up armor save. Guard just became Custodes almost. We don't get the invul save. Whatever. Okay. And we don't have the toughness. Okay, fine. But a 2-up armor save is now a real opportunity for Cadian infantry. And I think that's just amazing. You put down a 30-man unit of conscripts in cover, and someone uses 1 damage characteristic weapons against them. And say a high strength weapon, you're also reducing their chance of wounding you even by 16%. And then you're giving yourself a pretty decent armor save as well. This could really change some big moments in the game and give you some hyper resilient units, or give you that key moment when you need to retain that objective. This is something Guard has been struggling with in match play or narrative play or any type of game. We've been struggling to hold ground. I mean, T3 5-up save has never been much. It's never been amazing. But as the game has become deadlier, Guard has struggled to hold ground. And I think what they're trying to do here is give us that chance. Now let's get into that a little bit more, because they've done some other stuff to make us a little more resilient. So the next rule that's teased is Bastion Sword. This is a power sword relic, and it replaces any power sword. So if a Cadian infantry model is within 6 inches of the bearer of this relic, each time they make a combat attrition test, you ignore any and all modifiers. So if I'm below half strength with my conscripts, I ignore combat attrition modifiers. If I have a platoon commander with Bastion Sword hanging out next to them. Yes! Once again, reducing my attrition test casualties by 16% chance. That's awesome. That's this game of D6s. It's every time you adjust a pip on the die, it makes a huge impact on the game. So add this relic in there too. Now you're really talking about buffing some infantry and really keeping them in place. So they could have a 2-up armor save. They could have naturally leadership 6 without any other buffs. And then they're ignoring combat attrition modifiers. Now, this relic also has a pretty decent profile, but we all know guard and melee are so it's got strength +2, AP -3, damage 2. So usually going to be strength 5, maybe strength 6 if you're Cadian. AP3 is really great, especially in the age of everybody having an invulnerable save. It means they pretty much have to rely on that against your attacks. And damage 2 is wonderful because that means you can actually kill a Space Marine. And maybe one day when Chaos Space Marines actually get 2 wounds. Sorry, had to throw that salt out there. So, decent profile. It can also be buffed. Don't forget, guys, that Aradia, yes, the Primaris Psyker, still has that psychic power where she can give somebody +1 to hit. So she potentially could buff a officer model to hit on 2s. Hit on 2s. I correct myself. Hit on 2s in melee. Pretty good. Usually I use her on Bullgrins, though. If I'm going to use that plus to hit, it's either going to be on veterans in a shooting phase, or it's going to be on Bullgrins in the fight phase if I use a radio. But you could use that here for this Relic Sword, and maybe with your 3 attacks, take down a couple Space Marines. Yeah. It's okay for attacks. Mostly I'd use it for that attrition buff. The last thing they show us is really cool narratively. So it's a warlord trait called Gifted Commander. So after both players have deployed their armies, but before the first battle round begins, select either one Cadian vehicle, excluding Titanic, or up to 3 non-vehicle Cadian units from your army and redeploy them. It's kind of like the Ultramarines rule. It's pretty cool, except if the mission uses strategic reserves rules, any of these units can be placed in strategic reserves without having to spend any CPs, regardless of how many units are already in strategic reserves. If both players have this ability, then you roll off to decide who does something similar first. You could really bait your opponents with this one. Okay. The possibilities are really huge here. You could redeploy 90 conscripts with this. Holy cow, let your opponent deal with that, right? 90 conscripts just go into your strategic reserves, go into a whole different place on the battlefield, whatever. You could take your Lehman Russ tank commander and just take him off the table. Put him in strategic reserves. Let him come in from the side on turn 2 and just blow your opponent away with a battle cannon or a plasma executioner cannon. Right? Take Pask. Knight Commander Pask can just redeploy anywhere, off the table, doesn't matter. This could be really powerful for your tactics in the moment, and being able to read the board as a commander of a Cadian army. Being able to see what your opponent's doing, understanding the battlefield, understanding the mission, truly being a gifted commander. This is a really great narrative role. I'm looking forward to trying this out, especially since the days of gaining CP back in droves is well over with. You know, back in the days in 8th edition, when I used to average 26 command points during a match. Those days are over. So this could be a really wonderful option for being really cheeky with your deployments and moving your units around and trying things out. Yeah. Here's another example, actually. What if you had a Devil Dog, and then your opponent deploys a Dreadnought or something with Meltaguns to take out that Devil Dog, and you'd get no chance to shoot your multi-meltas on it, right? Well, instead, you could just put it in strategic reserves, have it come on from the side, and then surprise your opponent by eliminating their unit. You getting the first shot with it, and them giving no chance at being able to react to that. So, there's just a lot of potential here. Veterans, redeploying veterans. Holy cow, that's awesome. Just lots of great stuff. I'm not sure how this impacts transports with troops inside. I'm assuming we're going to get an FAQ on that. And I would assume that you would be able to redeploy a single transport with a unit inside, or even put that into your strategic reserves. But we'll see. They might FAQ that and say, nah, not what we intended. But as of right now, I would say that that's probably how that goes. So quick recap. We got 4 rules teased. There is a keyword that we don't know what it does yet. We don't know what White Shields does. So there's definitely more to come on that. There's more infantry buffs to come. And I definitely think there's a lot of things that could come out in this Octarius Warzone book for the Cadians that could really help us out with this. We don't know if we're going to see reprint of some of the Vigilus rules. We don't know if we're going to just see a full reprint of Psychic Awakening potentially, or if some of that is just not going to get reprinted at all. I hope so, because as of right now, I feel like that's some of the better rules for Guard, and especially Scions. It's pretty much the only way to run Scions, is to have the Psychic Awakening rules. So I'm sure we'll see something with that in this book, and this will be our stopgap until we get our Codex. Now, unfortunately, what I think that also means is our Codex is a little farther away than maybe some of us were hoping for. But this is fine. I think this is fine with me. I like getting a stopgap, especially if our Codex might be 6 months to a year away, right? This is okay with me. We needed a little buff. Me as a player, you guys know I'm a narrative player. I'm not really concerned with having the most cutthroat perfect list. But this sounds like it's definitely going to give us a good nudge, good reinforcements here to keep us going. I doubt we'll see anything else for other regiments unless they're generic rules for Guard. Because so far what Games Workshop has said is that these will be Cadian rules, because these are the remnants of the Cadian forces here in the Octarius sector. So that's really scary narratively. Because if you're not familiar with this Warzone, it's Tyranids versus Orcs, and the Guard are caught in the middle of it. And this is the Imperium's own doing. And so this is just the worst case scenario of fighting Xenos. So we'll see what happens. I'm very curious narratively what goes on too. I'm curious to see what you guys think of these rules as well, and other combos that I may have missed or not have thought about. I'm also looking forward to seeing any other teasers they do, and I'm waiting to see if other keywords that we've had lingering around, like the artillery keyword. Just saying, if we finally get some rules for that, which could be huge for some of our Forge World units. So, we'll see. Can't wait to see what comes out with this book, and I'll be updating you all as soon as I get my hands on a copy. All right, guys. Cadia stands.